All right, we are officially on baby watch now. I am due with my third baby, my second girl. So, boy, girl. This will be my second girl on Sunday. Today, as I am filming this, it is Monday. So, I've been having some contractions here and there, but nothing that sticks. And that's just kind of the way it goes. So, we're just getting ready for her to join the family. But right now, I am really thinking a lot about natural family planning in the sense of using it for medical purposes. Why am I thinking about this right now? A few weeks ago, I put out a video about NFP for married couples and what that looks like and why that is so important. And then I also did a video on why NFP is completely different than contraception. I'll link those two videos below for you. Today, I wanted to kind of flip and talk more so about how NFP, and again, NFP is natural family planning, fertility awareness-based methods, it's all kind of the same deal. So tracking your fertility, right? Tracking the natural biological signs that a woman's body is giving to show her when she is fertile, when she's not fertile, where she's at in her cycle, all of that, right? And so it can be used in marriage and in trying to plan your family, which is beautiful and awesome, and what my husband and I have used throughout our marriage to plan our families as well. But it also is so important in the medical realm. So that's what I'm going to be more so talking about today. And it's such a beautiful kind of combination between really bringing life and fruit into your family life, using it as a married couple, but then also, no matter what stage of life you are in, whether you are single and you're watching this, whether you are married, whether you're engaged and preparing for marriage, and no matter what stage of life you're in, this is still really helpful news for you. My name is Haley. I work at an OBGYN clinic where I teach women and couples how to chart their fertility cycles so that they can either achieve or avoid pregnancy, and also so that they can manage their fertility. There are so many different things that your body is telling you throughout the cycle that you may not be super aware of, but it could be telling you different things that could reveal hormonal imbalances or different reproductive disorders or things like that, right? And so kind of going back to what I said at the very beginning, the reason I'm thinking about this as I'm getting ready to birth my third baby is because I would not be pregnant with this baby had it not been for natural family planning, charting my cycle as a single woman. Again, I have a whole video that describes my journey and story with that too, that I'll link in the description below. But had I not gone through the medical journey as a single woman before I met my husband and understood what signs my body was giving me to tell me there was something wrong, I would never have been able, my husband and I would never have been able to conceive the children that we have been blessed with today. It wouldn't have happened, right? To give you a very brief story about it, I was 18, 19 years old. Something was going on with my cycle, something weird. It was irregular, it was weird. I knew there was something going on. And so I ended up going to a specific doctor that treats women with reproductive issues using natural family planning, using fertility awareness-based methods. They teach you to chart your cycle, and then based on what that chart is revealing, they can diagnose and treat from that. So what my chart was revealing was that I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, of course, my chart revealed that, and then they went and did blood work, ultrasound to confirm. But without having charted my cycle, I would have never been able to have that true diagnosis, at least at that time, right? And again, I'm 18, 19 years old. I'm not married. I'm not planning to have kids anytime soon. I'm not planning for any of that, but this is for the sake of my health. So with all of this, again, whether you are watching me right now and you are single, or you are engaged, or you are married, or you're dating, whatever stage of life that you are in, this is helpful information for you. This is why charting your cycle can help you understand the health of your fertility, the health of your menstrual cycle. If you are ovulating and if you're doing that in a timely manner, it can give you so much information. So today what I'm going to be doing is walking through the whole menstrual cycle. I'm going to kind of parse it into 4 parts for you today. And we're going to go through each specific part and what your chart can reveal to you. These are things that your cycle can be telling you. Your body can be speaking a language to you to tell you that there may be something going on and that you may want to see a doctor for it, get properly diagnosed, and get properly treated. So we're going to go through those 4 things today. Okay, so splitting the menstrual cycle into 4 different parts. So the menstrual cycle, or the fertility cycle, is from day 1 of your period, which is day 1 of bright red blood flow. Now, from that first day to the day before the next first day, meaning the day before your next period, that is your menstrual cycle. So it's from day 1 of your period to the day before your next period, okay? And so that range is going to be different for so many women. I think we have in our head like 28 days. That's the perfect amount of days in a cycle. And granted, yes, that's that's a great number of days. It's a very healthy number of days, but there is a range, and that's okay. So the healthy range that we want to see of a given cycle is going to be from 23 days, which is definitely on the lower end, 23 days to about 35 days. So it should be pretty stable. That doesn't mean that it has to be 28 days every single time. And if it's 29, there's something wrong. No, not at all. Any range of like 28 to 31, perfectly normal. Like just to give you an example. So we want to see a range like that. If there's anything 22 days or less, or more than 36, 37, 38 is definitely getting to the longer side, but 40 or more days, that's too long. So we want to make sure that we're in this sweet spot in the middle. So that is going to be kind of the number 1 sign of just looking at the menstrual cycle as a whole. How long is the menstrual cycle? That's going to be good information for you to pay attention to first. Now, as I said, we're going to kind of separate the menstrual cycle into 4 different parts. So the first part, actually the first 3 parts are all going to be part of what's called the follicular phase. So there's the follicular phase and then there's the luteal phase. So these are 2 separate parts of the cycle. And so the luteal phase we'll talk about in a minute. That's the last phase. But the follicular phase, I'm separating into 3 different parts. So I don't mean to confuse you, but we have 3 different parts in the follicular phase and then one part, which is the luteal phase, which altogether make 4 parts. So hopefully you're following me there. So the first part of the follicular phase is your period. It's the woman's menses. So here are some signs that your body may be giving you in the time of your bleeding that could be revealing some sort of hormonal imbalance, something going on that you may want to seek a doctor's help for. So number 1, painful periods. Your period should never be painful. If you are having to call off of work or call off of school or miss things because a period is so painful you are down for the count, see a doctor, please. That can reveal hormonal imbalances. It can also reveal maybe some cysts. There's a lot of different things that it could reveal, but it should never be painful like that. If you are having extreme cramps, go to a doctor, please. Periods should not be painful. Yes, are you going to have some discomfort? Sure, because your uterus is contracting and retracting, right? And that's going to cause some discomfort. That's what causes those cramps. 1 or 2 days of cramps is pretty typical as well. But when it starts turning from discomfort to pain and you're having to take around the clock ibuprofen just to handle it, like that shouldn't be what is happening. You don't deserve to have that much pain in your period. That's not normal and you don't deserve that. So go see a doctor if that is something that you are experiencing. Now, the color of the bleeding is also very important. Any black bleeding, 100% not supposed to be there. See a doctor for that. Now, 2 or more days of what I call tail end brown bleeding. That can also be a sign of hormonal imbalance. So let me explain what that is. So tail end brown bleeding means that at the tail end of your period, where it's kind of having, it's tapering off, right? Because normally with a period, it starts out pretty heavy. And then as it goes on, it should get lighter and lighter and lighter. So in those last few days, it's pretty typical to spot for a few days, just as you're coming to the end of that period. But if you're having 2 or more of those tail end bleeding days that are brown, 2 or more days of brown spotting at the tail end of your period can actually reveal possible low progesterone. Progesterone is the hormone that's super important in that luteal phase, in the very last phase. And so if you're having tail end brown bleeding in the next cycle, that can reveal possible low progesterone from the cycle before. That's something to look out for as well. How many days you are bleeding is also a way that your body is telling you that maybe something might be wrong. So if you are having less than 3 days or more than 7 days, so only 1 or 2 days of bleeding for your period, or if you're having 8 or more days of bleeding for your period and it just doesn't stop and just keeps going, that's something we would call unusual bleeding, right? Your period should be between 3 to 7 days. Now, the heaviness of your period is going to range throughout those 3 to 7 days, of course, but that should be the total amount of bleeding that you're experiencing. Now, the last thing with bleeding that I'll say is any unusual bleeding that's happening outside of your true menses. So what is a true menses? Well, your menses is your period. So a true period is going to be a phase of bleeding, again, between 3 and 7 days that occurs about 2 weeks after ovulation. So with every cycle, a woman should be ovulating about midpoint of her cycle. And then about 2 weeks after that ovulation, if she's not pregnant, she will have her period. And so that is a true period. A true period is following ovulation. So if a woman is having any unusual bleeding outside of that true period, so maybe mid-cycle bleeding or just unusual, not normal bleeding that she normally experiences, there's something going on there too. So another reason to go get that checked. Okay, now transitioning into this second part of the menstrual cycle. So still in that follicular phase. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier as well is that the follicular phase is all pre-ovulation. So ovulation is that main event throughout the cycle where the egg is released from the ovary. And there's 2 different phases that kind of hinge on that. So the follicular phase hinges on the side before ovulation. The luteal phase hinges on the side after ovulation. So that's kind of how we're parsing it out there. So the second part of that follicular phase is called early dry days. Not all women are going to have early dry days. Some women go straight from having their period right into starting to see cervical mucus. Cervical mucus, I also have another video all about cervical mucus. I'll just link it all down below. But cervical mucus is vital and super important for your fertility. But this can also be something that comes and goes. Cervical mucus is a reaction of hormones. So depending on what kind of cervical mucus you're having, when you're having it, that can be a sign of also different hormonal, the way that your hormones are balancing or are imbalanced that need to be balanced. So early dry days, most women will have some dry days, meaning not having any cervical mucus at all, between her period and her fertile window. When she's actually fertile, if she were to have intercourse, a pregnancy could possibly occur from that, right? There's usually a time in between that, maybe it's just even a few days, where she's not producing a whole lot of mucus. That's perfectly normal, perfectly healthy. It just means estrogen is still low. Cervical mucus is a direct causation of estrogen, right? So if estrogen is rising, you may start to see more and more cervical mucus. So a few dry days in between menses and when your actual fertile window begins, that is perfectly normal and that's very typical. If you're not having those dry days in between your menses and when your true fertile window begins, that could be a sign that the woman is just producing too much cervical mucus. Maybe there's something going on with estrogen. Maybe there's something going on with just producing too much vaginal discharge too. There could be something going on there. So it's just something worth noting. Okay, now transitioning into our third part of the menstrual cycle. So still in that follicular phase, still pre-ovulation, but now we're getting into ovulation is coming, it's imminent, and we are getting into our fertile window. So we had our menses, we had our early dry days, and now we're getting into that fertile window. Estrogen is starting to rise in your body. You're starting to see a lot more cervical mucus. It's kind of growing and growing and growing. You may even see more and more and more every single day. That is your body revving up for ovulation. And so if a woman were to have intercourse during this time of her cycle, pregnancy is a possibility. If the egg is there and there's cervical mucus there, there's a possibility for pregnancy. So what are some signs in this fertile window of that your body can be giving you to tell you maybe something's off? Well, the first thing I will say is that LH, which is a hormone short for luteinizing hormone, this hormone spikes right before you ovulate. And so this is the hormone. Basically, estrogen is rising and rising and rising. And then once your body says, okay, we're ready to ovulate, we're ready to go, luteinizing hormone, or the LH hormone, will spike. And it usually spikes anywhere between 12 to 36 hours, and then it comes back down. So it should not be high for very long. Now, LH is producing a type of mucus that is fully clear. It is crystal clear. You can see straight through it. It is stretching more than an inch, and it glides, or it's really slippery when you wipe. These are 3 different criteria that we look at when you are charting your cervical mucus to determine how high your estrogen and LH is. So when LH is super, super high and you're getting ready to ovulate, that's kind of kickstarting that ovulation process, you may notice a few days of mucus that is crystal clear, stretching an inch or more, and is gliding when you wipe, or that really, really slippery feeling when you wipe. When you get to where it has all 3 of those traits, you should be seeing 2 to 3 days of mucus that is all 3 of those traits. You may only see it once throughout the day. That's really fine. It's not like you're going to be seeing it all day, every day for those 3 days, but 2 or 3 days of the most fertile thing that you're seeing is having all of those 3 traits. That is golden, 2 to 3 days. Now, if you're having only 1 day of that type of mucus, or if you're having more than 3 days of that type of mucus, that can be also a sign of, again, like I keep saying, hormonal imbalance or something going on, right? The norm is that you should be seeing 2 to 3 days of mucus that is crystal clear, stretching an inch or more, and is gliding when you wipe. Again, all 3 of those. If you're experiencing more than 3 days of mucus that has 1 or 2 of those traits, totally fine. That's pretty typical. But to have all 3 of those traits, you should only be experiencing that for 2 or 3 days. Anything out of that range, it could be something going on that your body is telling you about. One more thing in this fertile window too, this is kind of accompanying both early dry days and the fertile window, but some women, typically women who have longer cycles, will have what's called mucus patches. So these mucus patches are just days of mucus that just come and go. So maybe she has a few days of dry, and then she'll have like 2 days that she sees cervical mucus, and then she goes dry again, and then she sees 2 or 3 days more, and then she goes dry again. And she just keeps these are mucus patches. They're patches that just keep coming up super randomly, right? Until she actually enters into that truly fertile window where the body is revving up for ovulation. This is actually what my charts were showing. TMI warning, whatever. This whole thing is TMI. How many times have I said mucus? But this is actually what my charts were showing. I was just having mucus coming and going. That's actually one of the signs that my doctor used to determine that I had a possibility of polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. So the patterns of your mucus are super, super important to be paying attention to for your fertility health. Okay, so we've gone through the first 3 phases of the cycle, all within the follicular phase. Right after that last phase, which is the fertile window, right? Or right towards the tail end, I should say, of that fertile window, ovulation happens, and that's when the egg is released. Possible pregnancy can occur. Now, if a woman did not have intercourse during that fertile window, then there's no possibility of pregnancy. The egg will die within about 24 hours after being released from the ovary, and she will not ovulate again throughout the rest of the cycle. So now, as we are ending ovulation, the egg is dead. There's no more eggs coming around. We get into what's called the luteal phase. This is the last phase of the cycle where a woman is completely infertile. Again, she's not going to be ovulating again. And so progesterone starts taking its turn. So we had estrogen being the more dominant hormone in that follicular phase where it's growing and growing. It's causing a lot of cervical mucus to happen. Luteal phase, progesterone does the exact opposite thing. So when a woman, after she ovulates, she should see that mucus dry fully up. And for the next 2 weeks until her next period, she really should just be dry. No cervical mucus at all. That's what progesterone does. It causes the mucus to dry up and stay dry until her next period. So in this luteal phase, here are some things that your body could be telling you that there could be something going on. So the first thing is, at the very, very end of that luteal phase, where you're starting to expect your period to come here pretty soon, if you are having 3 or more days of spotting before the first day of bright red blood flow, that can be a sign of low progesterone. So what's going on is that progesterone, that hormone that's dominant in the luteal phase, it's keeping your uterine lining together. It's keeping it intact, right? So the uterine lining is a bunch of blood cells that are thickening on the inside of your uterus, and they're attached to the uterine wall. And so this thickens and thickens and thickens throughout your cycle. And so that's what your period is. When you have a period, it's that uterine lining being shed. So progesterone's job is to make sure that the uterine lining stays intact until the first day of your period. However, if you are having 3 or more days of spotting before the first day of bright red blood flow, that could be that progesterone is it's lowering too early. It's not staying high enough, long enough to keep that endometrium intact. So it starts to break apart those capillaries a little bit, and that's going to be that early spotting that you see. So a day, maybe even 2 days of spotting is pretty typical to happen right before a period, but 3 or more days, automatically, that is sign you may be experiencing low progesterone. Now, the length of the luteal phase is very important to pay attention to as well. And you really won't be able to pinpoint the length of the luteal phase unless you are charting your cycle. Because by charting your cycle, you can determine around the time ovulation is happening. And you can't do that very precisely without charting on a day-by-day basis what you're seeing. So, but the length of the luteal phase is very important. The length of the follicular phase is more variable. It's okay if it moves around a little bit. But the luteal phase, no matter how long your cycles are, or no matter how irregular your cycles are, it should be very stable. Once you ovulate, you should have about 2 weeks until your next period. So the rule of thumb is that you should have anywhere between 10 to 16 days of a luteal phase, or that post-ovulation phase. 10 to 16 days is a very generalized range. But for every specific woman, it should be even more precise. So if I'm working with a woman who usually experiences about 10-day, maybe 11-day luteal phase, and all of a sudden she has like a 16-day luteal phase, that should be a red sign going off in my head saying, okay, what is going on here? It should not be variable. It is really stable for every single woman. So if your luteal phase is less than 10 days or more than 16 days, and it's not staying very stable, that is another possible sign that could be something going on with progesterone or whatnot. If you are experiencing cervical mucus in this luteal phase, that could also be a sign of different things. So like I said, after you ovulate, progesterone should be high, so you shouldn't be experiencing really any mucus at all. Now, some women experience mucus all the time and it's just never ending, and that is also a sign of something going on. But if you're experiencing a lot of mucus in that luteal phase, that's also something your body is telling you there may be something going on there. Now, especially if in that luteal phase you're experiencing mucus that has more of a like gummy consistency to it. So whenever you get a gift card, you know how there's like that strip on the back that you peel off, like that clear glue strip or whatever. Sometimes our bodies can produce a mucus that kind of has a similar consistency to that, where if you I don't recommend trying this, but you feel like you could roll it in a ball, or it just has like a very gummy or rigid consistency to it, that can actually be a sign of cervical inflammation, especially if that's something that you're experiencing in the luteal phase. So something worth noting as well. And lastly, if you are having PMS symptoms that are happening more than 3 days before that first day of bright red blood flow, that's also a sign of a possible low progesterone. And by PMS symptoms, I mean things like crying easily, cravings, bloating, weight gain, things like that. If you are experiencing it, or breast tenderness is another one. If you're experiencing those a few days before a period, yeah, pretty typical. But if it's more than 3 days, that's where we're getting into, okay, you do not deserve to be experiencing PMS symptoms for that long. Let's figure out what's going on there. Now that we've gone through the 4 parts of the menstrual cycle, different signs that your body can be giving you to tell you there may be something going on, let's talk about when to actually seek medical help for it, because it's not necessarily like if you're sitting here and you're like, oh, I have that, yeah, I have that, yeah, I have that. It doesn't necessarily mean that right now, today, or no, you're too late. Yesterday, you needed to go see an OBGYN. That's not necessarily the case. So I want to calm down any worries that you may have. This is just to inform you about different things that your body could be telling you that there may be something going on. So when do you seek medical attention for this? Well, there's kind of two guidelines here. So the first guideline is if you are having 6 months or more of symptoms, but atypical cycle. So what does that mean? So that means if there's nothing really going on with your cycle, it looks pretty regular, but you're experiencing like bodily symptoms like acne or PMS for too long, or things like that, just kind of symptoms that your body is revealing, 6 or more months of those that is when you'd want to seek some medical help. Maybe go get in touch with your general practitioner or with an OBGYN. Now, if you are having 3 or more months of symptoms like acne, PMS, things like that, but also your chart is revealing different signs that there's something, that there could be something going on, or maybe you're not charting, but you're noticing different things that you feel are irregular with your cycle, also reason to go seek medical attention. So 3 or more months of experiencing irregularities with your cycle, or you're noticing different things on your chart, maybe some things that I've already told you, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's something consistent that I've been seeing. If it's been more than 3 months of seeing that and you have symptoms, go seek medical attention. Now, one thing is that if you are experiencing any unusual bleeding at all, so you have a typical period and then maybe you have some mid-cycle bleeding, or you're having like really, really painful periods, do not wait. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Like, you need to seek medical help, because unusual bleeding can be a more serious thing. So I want you, for your sake and for your reproductive health, I want you to go seek medical attention for any of those unusual bleeding or incredibly painful periods that you're having. If you are experiencing something with your cycle or symptoms of anything that just seem weird to you or irregular to you, just go make an appointment. If you have any sort of intuition, you're like, this is not right, I do not feel right, or this doesn't look right, just go seek medical attention. Go make an appointment and just see what happens, right? It could be that intuition that is telling you something's going on as well. So listen to your intuition, listen to your gut. All right, everyone. So there you have it. Those are some good guidelines as to what your cycle or what your chart can reveal to you to determine that there may be something going on. This is how I was diagnosed with PCOS and was properly treated, and am now able to have the children that I have. I wouldn't give that up for anything. And I started that journey as a single woman. So whether you are single, engaged, married, no matter what stage of life you are in, I highly, highly recommend learning how to chart your cycle and looking for these signs that your body could be telling you that there may be something going on, so that you can have the most optimal health and quality of life that you deserve. Please like this video and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, and I will see you guys again next week.